and welcome to CrossTech LATAM 2025 from Guatemala. I have the pleasure today, our first day of conference, to be in the company of Alberto de la Portilla from Integra Advisors. Thank you so much, Alberto, for joining us today.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. We love coming to Guatemala. I love to come to Guatemala 2 or 3 times a year. We have many clients, we have many friends, we have many colleagues that live and operate here, primarily in the financial sector. So it's always a pleasure to come here. And I was so happy to hear that CrossTech was doing the event in Guatemala, which is one of my favorite countries to visit from Miami. So thank you for the opportunity.
Great. You know, in spite of having a lot of friends, clients, partners, we do have the option also of getting to know Integra Advisors. So for those that don't yet, what will be, those insights about the company?
Right. So Integra Advisors has been around for 16 years. We're essentially a risk management advisory firm, and we focus on not so much first-tier clients, but sort of second and third-tier clients. At a mid-market is who we work with, and they could be financial clients, but also non-financial clients, because we have essentially 2 practice areas. We have one is a corporate due diligence practice where we assist clients in doing corporate due diligence and risk assessments of potential partners in Latin America. So we work all over Central and South America and the Caribbean, assisting large companies that are looking to do deals, acquisitions, and mergers in the region, and there's always opportunity here. But on the compliance advisory side, we work with a lot of financial institutions, and today the financial industry is very broad, that definition, right? We work with fintechs and crypto and stablecoin companies, but also traditional banks, international banks, and community banks. And we help them with anti-money laundering compliance advisory, training, customer due diligence of high-risk customers. And we do also a lot of these sort of ongoing assessments of their programs, almost like a third-party independent assessment of your compliance program, not so much based on your local regulation, because we know you have the banks will have their internal auditors and maybe their external auditors that does it in accordance with the local regulation, but we do it based on international best practices, which is our focal point. And so one of the things that we are most proud of is we have been able to sort of bridge the gap that exists between LatAm banks and U.S. banks, that LatAm banks that want to establish a U.S. correspondent relationship to have access to the U.S. dollar. We've been able to facilitate that process because we've been able to identify maybe gaps that then we have documented that, reported that to our clients in Latin America, and then they have addressed those immediately, and they're able to then potentially find a banking partner in the United States to work with because they've corrected based on our validations and assessments. So that's who Integra Advisors is.
We have been able to talk about different fintech approaches and understanding partnerships within banks. There is a special topic that needs to be discussed and needs to be very well executed, and it's risk management. Talking about third-party risk management, what will be that approach that as Integra Advisors you will be providing for the fintech industry?
So let me answer that 2 ways. One is from the banking standpoint, we work with some financial institutions that are incorporating more partnerships with banks, and so they are required to have a third-party risk management program. One of the things, and this is really important to emphasize, we have been attending different events that the regulators from the OCC and the Federal Reserve have been attending, as well as state regulators. As you know, in the United States, every state has its own regulations requiring financial licensing and providing financial services to customers in that state. And when you ask the regulators what's their number one concern, whether you're a state regulator or a federal regulator, the number one concern is third-party risk management. Number one, beyond fraud, beyond cybersecurity, above all that, because they're very concerned that banks are not properly prepared to onboard a new fintech and maintain that experience with a fintech, because they're concerned that the fintech could potentially be hacked. And so the other thing to think about is from the fintech side, you have to be prepared for the types of questions that the banking partners are going to ask of you, right? So it's not just a banking partner, but it's a payment brand that's going to ask you many intrusive questions about how your compliance program is in terms of, is it adequate? Is it reasonable? Your cybersecurity measures, are they adequate and reasonable? Have they been independently validated by a third party? Do you have the proper, obviously, business continuity plan, financial stability, and all of that? So from the fintech standpoint, obviously the large fintechs are much more prepared. They're better funded. But we're living in a world where the growth of the fintech space is, I think it's 5x by 2030, the growth. And so what we expect to see out of that assumes that there's going to be a lot of new startups entering this space. And the startups are not necessarily equipped financially or educationally to deal with some of the compliance challenges when you're addressing third-party risk management requests from your banking partner. So it's training, it's making sure that they have the right training, the latest trends in terms of financial crimes, latest regulatory requirements out of the United States or global best practices, I should say. Do you have the right risk assessment process where you're assessing your own risk, but also the risk each customer represents to the bank? Do you have a designated compliance officer? So we have seen smaller fintechs might have someone that is a friend of the firm acting as a compliance officer. So we are encouraging and educating smaller fintechs, either pre-launching of their product or, preferably pre-launch, that they have a designated compliance officer that has the certification and the right training and can manage the program independently and has the right reporting to the board of directors. Are the policies and procedures intact? Are the policies and procedures detailed enough to that a third party, whether it's a regulator or a third party auditor, can come in and at least get a comfort level that there is a process in place and it's been documented and approved by the board of directors? And lastly, the customer due diligence process is extremely important. So a lot of the fintechs have to have a strong customer due diligence, a know your customer, a sanction screening process. And these are things that you would expect a fintech that probably doesn't have a license to operate, doesn't have a money remitter license, and it's only going to be like an application but it's going to lean on banks in the U.S. and maybe banks in Latin America to provide the service of remesas, for example, to their customers. That's a challenge because you're going to be expected to almost behave as a financial institution from a compliance standpoint.
I think one of the important elements reference to that and you said it's all the KYC approach as well.
Yeah.
Getting to know your client, understanding what are the needs. So let's go specifically talking about Integra Advisors. So saying all of what you have explained and understanding the fintech world and what needs to be known and assessed and followed, documented. What will be that, a couple of very specific insights that you will share with the fintech community from the perspective of a CEO from a very important company such as Advisors? Yeah.
So I think it's important to acknowledge that no fintech is the same, right? So every fintech is unique, but some of the challenges that we have seen, and there's data also that can support this. I think there was some data recently that 75% of all fintech startups fail due to regulatory compliance challenges, right? So how do you address that? So number one, you have to go in. A lot of the startups that we have worked with and that are here in the conference are young, highly innovative, with great ideas, right? Fantastic ideas, and they want to go to market as soon as possible. Right, because the time is ripe. They had funding from venture capital, but you have to have also sufficient funding to invest in your compliance program. That's extremely important. You have to have top to bottom, right, commitment from the board. The board needs to be extremely engaged, both from a training standpoint, but also from a funding and also from a management and oversight supervision standpoint. The compliance officer is absolutely critical. Again, we have seen a lot of the fintechs that we work with, again, they're startups. There might be 3 or 4 or 5 people in the company. And the compliance officer is also doing a lot of other things. So defining the roles and responsibilities of the compliance officer is absolutely critical, and have that person dedicated 100% of the time to the compliance because you have to demonstrate that to your banking partner. You have to demonstrate that you are equipped with the right staff, with the right systems, with the right controls, and that this program has been independently validated. And that's where we have done some of our best work, is we have come in and done an independent validation or an assessment of your program and say, okay, we have identified these gaps. You're not going to go to market tomorrow. It's going to take a little bit of time. We've also seen, interestingly, that the response, the cooperation, the reaction to our gap analysis and our recommendations are addressed immediately. I mean, immediately, like in a weekend, they have an emergency board meeting. Let's address everything. Let's document it. And so it gives us an opportunity to then reassess it and then provide a report that says, okay, they've addressed these actions. There's more to do, but there's obviously an effort that we can demonstrate that they want to do the right thing and they want to do it in accordance with industry best practices. So, I mean, I think some of the other things that we have helped clients with are if a fintech is looking at potential investors, if it's not a venture capital, an established venture capital firm, but it's maybe a family office or individual investors, we have helped fintechs understand the risk involved and, just as doing our due diligence of, because you have to know source of wealth, right? And where that's coming from. And that's extremely important. So we've done some of that work as well for some of the early startups. And then training, educating them on, because they're not focused on that, right? They're focused on, I want to launch today. We have this fantastic product. We're going to make
eagerness of putting it to the market. We're
going to meet the market. Yeah. And there are fantastic ideas and ideas that are absolutely necessary today in terms of remittances, in terms of reaching a underbanked community in Latin America. So I think it's important that they're, in terms of training and understanding what are some of what's trending. What's trending in terms of financial crimes, sanctions, what you can and should not do, and just be aware of it so you can build that into your monitoring system so you can detect that activity and be able to report it as soon as possible.
Great. So we're going to have the opportunity to have you for the next couple of days. But else, where can we find Integra Advisors?
So you can find us obviously on the internet, www.integral-advisors, advisers.com. You could also find us on LinkedIn. I host a podcast called Integral Talks,
right,
where I interview thought leaders in risk and compliance, and we cover everything. We just covered last week. It hasn't gone live yet, but we just covered fentanyl trafficking involving China and Mexican drug cartels and what's happening and what's expected coming out of the U.S. in terms of new law enforcement and regulatory guidelines. We've covered stable coins. We've covered a lot of different very topical items that I think our audience of LATAM bankers, LATAM risk management professionals, and U.S., of course, will appreciate. You could find us at different conferences. We participate at the FIBA conference, the AML compliance conference. I've spoken at that conference. I've moderated panels on FATF. But you could definitely find us on social media, and we have a newsletter that if you can log into our website, sign up for our newsletter. You'll see monthly news items that we publish. We put out white papers as well. And we are going to be doing a series of third-party risk management in the coming months, talking about cybersecurity, talking about some of the legal challenges that fintechs have, particularly startups, and also, of course, the anti-money laundering compliance and sanction risk compliance.
Wonderful. What a powerful platform.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you, Alberto.
Thank you.
For joining us. This is CrossTech LATAM from Guatemala 2025.
Muchas gracias.